Evening all. I am genuinely really excited to have you here, either live or on the recording. Um, Been really looking forward to this. I've been a big fan of Amy's for ages and was really excited when I saw her latest book come out. So you're all equally welcome for what I know will be a fascinating hour. So my guest today is Amy Peters, an experienced therapist, trainer, speaker, and passionate advocate for neurodivergent affirming practice. As an autistic and ADHD therapist herself, Amy brings together personal expertise and lived experience to challenge some of the assumptions that have long shaped the therapy room. Amy is the founder of New Glade Counselling, which is local to me here in Kent, and the creator of Neurocards, which has sold in its thousands, and the author of the new book, Neurodivergent Affirming Therapy, Rethinking Approaches for Autistic and ADHD Clients. In this book, Amy asks therapists to look beyond simply adapting a few techniques. Instead, she invites us to examine what we may need to unlearn, the unconscious biases, traditional expectations, and one-size-fits-all ideas that can leave neurodivergent clients feeling misunderstood, pathologized, or expected to change themselves in order to fit the therapy. So I already have a ton of questions, having devoured the book, but I promise I'll leave time for any that you have at the end. So if a question arises, please pop it in the chat and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. This session is being recorded, so when you ask your question, we'll blank out your face so you won't be seen, but your voice will be heard. So here we go. Amy, welcome. It is wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. What an introduction. Thank you, Darren. And yeah, lovely to see everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening, coming out on a sunny evening. Yeah, lovely to be here.
I've loved writing the book, reading the book. I can only imagine the level of effort it took to write the book. I can't even begin to imagine that. And I can't wait to get into it. How was the process of writing?
Yeah, I mean, it took probably a solid year to write the book, but I'm so passionate about this subject that I could talk about it all day, all night, and then all day the next day. So I think what was great about the book is like instead of doing a training where you're limited to, your hour or your day or whatever, I could just write and write and write, which was amazing. That process was great. The editing process, not so much.
Oh no, I
The
can't even
rereading,
imagine.
the proofreading, the going back over it, less exciting. But yeah, the actual process of itself, itself was great just to get really stuck in and say what I've always wanted to say and get out all the ideas and everything was yeah, an amazing opportunity. I've loved it.
Yeah, fantastic. And you've just got so much to share. Yeah, talking of getting into it, let me start with some questions about the book. Um, so this is sorry, I'm probably going to ramble because I just love the book so much. I have so much to say. Um, I really wanted to start with, and I've got it up on my screen to read it out. There was a note from your book that really struck me.
Mhm.
Um, and you almost wrote it as an aside, and yet it seemed to contain so much of what I was taking from your book. Um, and it was in this chapter, normalize refers to affirming neurodivergent ways of being as valid and belonging within the wide range of human diversity. It's not about encouraging neurodivergent people to comply or conform to neurotypical ways. Instead, this approach recognizes the importance of allowing autistic, ADHD, and otherwise neurodivergent people to feel seen and accepted as they are. I just grasped that because it just felt like, I mean, it was quite near the end of the book, but it just seemed to encapsulate all the kind of fundamental feelings that I got as I was reading throughout that sense of being recognized for who you really are rather than pathologized. Um, I found it to be so affirming, positive, and clear. So first of all, thank you, for bringing it all together in such an easy way. And I suppose I was wondering, do you have a favourite section from the book? Maybe there's like a bit
Uh,
you'd like to head to. I
yeah,
don't
I've got
know.
a quote, but to be perfectly honest, my favorite quote changes every time I'm asked.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
so in preparation for this, I made sure to pick one for today. But yeah, and I love your example, Darren, and like how amazing to have like my words read back to spoken back to me. Like that's just like, I don't think I'll ever get used to that, which I love. But yeah, so my quote that I've chosen tonight is a short one, but it's from the conclusion actually, right at the very end. And I've said every conversation, intervention, and active reflection you bring into your practice has the power to challenge outdated models and shape a more attuned approach to therapy. And I think I chose that really today because it kind of sums up how transformative this work can be for both therapists and potential clients as well. And also the fact that we can do this work and it can affect our clients, but also it includes things we do outside of therapy and conversations we have outside of therapy, whether that's friends or loved ones or our managers or our peers or whatever, all of those conversations we have, because there's so many adults that might not recognize themselves as neurodivergent, they might be undiagnosed, and we get to learn this stuff and then take that out into the world. So yeah, so that today is my favorite quote anyway.
I really love that quote. It just again, it's similar to mine in that way that it encompasses so much of the spirit of the book.
Mm,
And I just feel the message throughout was actually this idea of this label, this neurodivergent label, is actually something to kind of actually, rather than feel down about, it's really something to celebrate in those differences and
mhm,
really embracing the differences. And that just, yeah, as a disabled gay man, that really spoke to me
mm,
in a different way. It just felt really the power of being accepted for who you really are,
mm,
for who you are, not for your
mm.
label.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I talk about intersectionality in the book quite a lot too, so where our identities intersect to produce different forms of discrimination in some that we experience in some ways, and that is something that we need to bring into this work as well. So, although it's called neurodivergent affirming therapy and it's about approaches for autistic and ADHD people, because I'm autistic and ADHD, it also encompasses like the work is much broader than that. So it's
Mm.
about decolonizing, oh, I can never say that word, decolonizing our practice, depathologizing. There's so much other stuff, rich stuff in there that we can learn from it. So it really isn't just about neurodivergence as well, I think.
And that de-pathologizing, it was only as I read your book and I read some of the examples, I realized, oh, I do this all the time. I hadn't even realized I was doing it. I think I'm fairly aware, but yet some of the examples just feel like, oh, yeah, that. And I think that idea of doing like a personal audit on your own biases and just checking in and asking, why do I think that? And certainly in the counseling room, since I've read your book, I found myself doing that more often. Why have I jumped to that conclusion? Um, it's really
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, that I mean that's great to hear. But the thing is, like we all have grown up in the same systems, especially like in this country. If you've grown up in this country, then we've absorbed lots of ableism and other forms of oppression and things like that that are embedded in lots of our systems. And so and in the books that we've read and in the TV that we've watched and everything, it's all built into that. So of course we're going to have those internalized messages. And I think that's like an important point that we're all learning. I've certainly still got much more to learn, and it's a continual reflective process. But yeah, how great that that stayed with you, so that you can identify that in the room and just like you say, it's just questioning. Oh, okay, why do I assume that? Where's that coming from? And just being a bit reflective, really. I think that's what the best thing for us to be able to do as therapists, definitely.
And I think that thing really came through in the book, that idea
Yeah.
of be open-minded. to admit where you're at. Actually, if you're going to improve, if you want change, you kind of need to accept what needs changing.
hmm Yeah,
Um,
I agree. I agree, definitely. And there's that say there probably is a saying, I can't think of it exactly, but that kind of where growth is where the discomfort is. I think
mhm.
there's a quote there. And we have to get a bit uncomfortable, don't we? Definitely as counselors, therapists, we do get uncomfortable in that work, and our client sometimes has to get uncomfortable in the work. But that includes the work we do ourselves continually too. So I think that's an important part, but also not to have, to try not to feel too much shame or anxiety about that or worry about what we might have said in the past. Attitudes have changed dramatically, language has changed
Mm.
dramatically, and yeah, let's just keep learning
Well,
and keep
I
asking
mean,
the questions.
I'm happy to own it. Within our emails before this conversation, there was a term I used, and I raised a child. I'm raising one now who has ADHD, but I raised one with both autism and ADHD as a foster carer. And the language I was using was 15 years out of date, and but that's the language that I've been taught, trained to use. And actually, you very politely kind of directed me in a different direction. And you did that in such a gentle way that I didn't feel any shame in that at all. And I just, how do we do that when we're in a room with a counselor? How do we not shame them or shame
Yeah.
ourselves?
Yeah, it's really hard. And obviously, in terms of clients coming in and the way they might refer to themselves, we're not going to be challenging that or
No, no.
gently or otherwise. We might be working on that over time, but we're not going to bring that in. But yeah, I think with counselors and certainly in training and things like that, these are the terms that you've sort of, for some reason, latched onto. And there was nothing problematic about your language at all. It's just that it's bringing it up to date, isn't it? And sort of
Mm,
I think when you're immersed in that world, I'm very much immersed in the neurodivergent affirming community, the neurodivergent community in terms of therapy anyway. So it just becomes a sort of very natural thing. And very much I wanted in the book for it not to be something, to be something that you could own and
yeah,
understand why. And like I say, not carry that shame too much. And I think we can do that gently because
yeah.
we're not coming in with a kind of in an attacking way in any way. It is just very much about okay, let's learning, and everyone's here tonight to learn, right? They're here because they're interested in the conversation, or they want to pick something up, or they want to have a think about these things. So I think naturally we're curious, so that lends itself to this kind of thing.
And I'm assuming there'll be a second edition of this book then in the next 15 years where we update some of the
I think
terms that we're currently using.
I think it will change. Yeah, it will change. That was one of my worries actually, because it was a year in the writing and then a year in publication. The publisher had it for a
Hmm.
year and all the editing process. And I kept thinking, oh God, what if something comes out and it massively changes? But yeah, thankfully it's up to
So
date and
far,
it's
so
all good.
good.
It's all
Yeah,
good.
excellent.
But yeah, very much in the book I've said that it's something to keep an eye on and yeah, keep looking into it.
Um, the other thing that I really loved about your book was, and I'll hold it up now for those that haven't seen it, Neurodivergent Affirming Therapy. Um, Available in all good stores now, or a discount code on the notes. Um, I just found it really easy to read. So I I read it from start to finish, and actually I definitely would urge everyone to do that because I think you need the full, I don't know if you agree with me, but I feel like you need the full context and understanding of the whole journey and the reasons why you might then mention things later on. However, I really like the fact that now that I have read it all, I've got pages folded over, highlights bits where I know I can just dip back in because it's just so well structured and easy to follow. And I really like the way you've structured it. It's really engaging. And you write engagingly about the theory, but also follow it up with actual strategies. And I really love the strategies. I'm sorry, I'm saying loads. I'm just bombarding you. But I'd never heard of the strategies around hygiene before, for example. So I'm just wondering how those came about.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that. Like that amazing. Accessibility was one of my big goals with this,
Oh,
especially
okay. I hadn't realized that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, especially as an ADHDer, I find reading quite difficult, and some of the kind of big theoretical textbooks and things that I read, I don't know how I got through the training, to be fair. Like I don't know how I did it, but I do struggle and I have to reread and things like that. So
And
it was
but it's
really
even
important to
in
kind
like
of chunk
the
it.
spacing and the way the white space, the eye can just follow it all just so
Mhm.
it's just a really lovely, clear read. Honestly, I thought it was so I don't know if that was by mistake or by design, but
Well,
honestly,
hopefully by design. Yes. Yeah, thank you. As I say, I needed that. I need that for me. So, and I know I can really understand a book better if I can kind of hear the author's voice in the book rather
hmm
than it be a very textbook style. So that was really something that I wanted to sort of get away from that textbook side of things. But yeah, to your point about strategies and stuff, yes, so the first sort of section of the book is about theory and we look at trauma and look at reframing autism and ADHD through a different lens, through the neurodivergent affirming lens. And then the strategies are more so obviously we're probably all sorts of different types of counselors in here and we might have different modalities amongst us and people listening. But ultimately, some of us we might use strategies in our work. We may not, but we also end up speaking to different autistic and ADHD people within our circles, right? So
hmm
I really wanted to sort of challenge some of the what I've called neuronormative assumptions and suggestions in the book, which are so just quickly to explain, neuronormativity or neuronormative standards are the kind of unwritten rules that we have in society that say there's one right way to be, one right way to express, one right way to be healthy, to be normal, all of those things. And we have all these sort of standards, and that's all set up for us from a very young age. We sort of absorb all of this. And if we're suggesting something, so we've got a client that maybe is ADHD and saying, "Oh, I'm really struggling to get motivated in the morning," and we might say something like, "Oh, just set more alarms, maybe, if you thought of doing that," and or you're struggling with your work, "Oh, maybe try to do lists or something like that." Now, um, for many of us who might be neurodivergent here will have heard those sort of things many times and we'll know that it just doesn't work for us. It just doesn't work for our brains, and it's based on these kind of neuronormative assumptions that everybody is going to have the same way of being motivated or the same way of doing tasks or whatever that might be. So yeah, very much wanted to take things that neurodivergent people often find difficult, look at the neuronormative advice, and then challenge that, suggest why it's potentially going to be difficult for someone who's neurodivergent to follow that through, and then offer some other alternatives. And the reason I included things like hygiene and self-care in that respect, and things like tidying and stuff, and I very much think it came from a very personal place as well. When we match ourselves up to those, try and match ourselves up to that neuronormativity, and then we fail at it because it's just not, those standards are not based for us, they're not designed for us, as neurodivergent people, what actually happens, rather than us going, "Oh, that's neuronormative standards, that's what that is, and that's society, that's what that is," we go, "Oh, I'm awful, I'm lazy, I'm a failure, I can't do this." And that will happen at such a young age, a very young age. So that those internalized messages stay with us about who we are. And I very much wanted to challenge that and go, okay, so showering might be really difficult for an autistic person or an ADHD person, let's say, for a variety of reasons, for sensory reasons, for the executive function that's involved, all the different tasks that's involved in doing that, having that shower, the transitioning, the feel of the water. Like there's so many things in there, and looking at, okay, maybe there's other ways we can kind of remove barriers here. Maybe there are ways we can make things easier for you and accommodate for you. And I think as counsellors, whether we bring that directly into the room for that client or whether it's just the thing we've got in the back of our mind, I think it's useful to challenge those assumptions. That was a bit of a long answer for that, but hopefully that.
Yeah, but for me, actually, what you've hit on is what I wasn't able to articulate before we've had this conversation. But it's all I feel like it's by reading the book, it has helped it become my way of being. So actually, the various examples have just put in my mind that other people don't find everything as easy as I do, or other people need to do things in a slightly different way. And so it's really made me consider actually, so you mentioned very briefly transitions. I've been reflecting on my own work in the counselling room, and sometimes maybe I draw sessions to a close too abruptly at the end, and maybe I could be more gentle in that. And I think it's just that general way that you carry yourself. So being aware that you might not need to verbalize, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that in terms of showering? It's just having understanding of, yeah, life is different and it's things are challenging and
Mm,
just becoming that. I mean, we all try and aim for empathy, don't we? But to be able to open ourselves up to a different kind of empathy and a different kind of outlook. And it really is, I mean, it's called neurodivergent. It's to do with the brain. It's different way of the brain working and processing. And it's about
mm,
understanding how we're wired. Um,
definitely.
in terms of, like I've mentioned, the reflection there on transitions,
Mm,
does that come up often in therapy, like in terms of changing subjects or session
yeah,
times?
definitely. Yeah, it definitely can do. And I think particularly in terms of the, as you say, like how you start and end a session, that would
Mm.
definitely potentially come into it. But also not making the assumption that an autistic person is going to struggle with those transitions. They might not. They may struggle with transitions in other places, but not in therapy. That's the thing. But it's just being able to check in with that and having options or collaborating with them, to see, well, what's that like? Or even if you would, Darren, in that example, were able to bring that in another session and say, oh, I'm wondering what the ending of sessions feels like for you. And having a bit of an explore about that. And then you might even get feedback that says, oh, yeah, actually, I struggle with that a bit. Or I don't know, an online session, it might be that they need to think about some kind of ritual after they've closed the laptop or something along those lines to
Mm.
help. But yeah, it's really about being collaborative and again, like I say, not making assumptions either way, really.
Hmm.
You know.
And that's then led me to think about in the book you mentioned withdrawals and deposits, and I loved that. But I probably would do a very bad explanation of it. I wondered, can you share that for everyone? What we mean by the withdrawals and deposits?
Yeah, so that was talking about kind of energy pacing. So for a lot of neurodivergent people, and particularly we're talking about autistic and ADHD people, but we will have a finite amount of energy, well, like everyone does, but certain things will take more energy than others. So this was one strategy. It's not my original strategy, but it's one I use with clients, and I find it a really good one. So we look at maybe making a list. It could just be a very simple list. What are your withdrawals? What are your deposits? A bit like a bank account, but it's your energy bank account. So you will look at what are your withdrawals? What are the things that drain you, that really take it out of you, that really make you, like at the end of the day, have to just stare at the wall because you've got nothing left? What are the things? Trying to identify as best you can what those things are. And that could be being in a crowd of people, it could be a day at school or something like that. But it could be email from a particular person or dealing with a particular person or when my computer goes wrong, when a tech issue goes wrong or
Mhm.
something, I'm just completely drained or whatever. So we're thinking about the very specific things, possibly quite small things. And then on the other side of the coin, we're looking at deposits, and that will be the stuff that really brings us joy, brings us maybe more energy, but maybe it's the sort of calming things. And again, that could be something like a self-care act. It could be your bubble bath or whatever, but it could be a hug with a pet. It could be a the ritual of making a cup of tea, all of
Mhm.
those things, and noticing those things, or maybe a piece of music that really helps you. And I just find for neurodivergent clients, it really helps to have that written out. And whilst that might seem like quite an obvious thing to do, I think particularly for autistic and ADHD people, we've often or particularly people who are late identified, like I am late diagnosed, we have masked that for a long time. So certainly for me, understanding in my late 30s that I was autistic and ADHD, there was so much that I needed to uncover that I wouldn't have noticed drained me, because I would have just assumed that was my problem, my personal failing, rather than something that actually I could accommodate and I could do something
Mm,
about, or that I could say no to it, right? Because I was so busy people pleasing that I wasn't going to say no to it. And equally on the deposit side, it took a long time, and even now, sort of understanding, oh, these are the things that give me joy, maybe
mm,
sensory joy. There's something in there that gives me joy, or perhaps it's a certain thing that I haven't allowed myself before because I don't know, I've seen it as childish or something along those
mm,
lines. And actually, with this, we can kind of embrace what's the reality here for this client. And I do think also, because so many neurodivergent people have co-occurring conditions as well. So we have a lot of people who have different health conditions, physical conditions. Chronic fatigue is very common, and burnout as well, of course. So when we're looking at energy specifically, like, I think that's a really useful strategy to kind of look at
mm.
with people.
And a really positive one. So I have multiple sclerosis, so burnout and energy levels and fatigue are a huge issue for me. So I went on a fatigue management course, and they very much focus on the parts of life that drain you and trying to avoid them or cut them down or how to manage them. But that it sounds really silly, but it was only your book that made me think, oh, there are things in life that really boost me. There are certain
Mm.
people I spend half an hour with them, I feel really drained, like I've run a marathon. And there's other people I spend 10 minutes with them and they just feel really uplifted, don't you? I think for me, it smells quite often. A nice citrus smell or something will really kind of be quite a mood boost for me. So that's why I absolutely really, really related, and quite a few bits in the book made me realize, oh, actually, it's a lot of what I'm learning about here from you. This doesn't need to be a neurodivergent client. There's so many ideas here that we actually could just transpose to all layers of our work just by remaining curious of what works for the individual.
Definitely. I definitely agree with you. And I think that's certainly something I say in the book, that doing this work, whether that's the internal work that the therapist is doing on various different things, their ableism, their assumptions and stuff, or the strategies that you're putting in place in the therapy room, none of that hinders anybody else. And in fact, is only going to help somebody who maybe has a complex trauma history, or maybe they're a marginalized client in some other way, or
Mhm.
they've have a history of oppression, or it's going to be helpful for those clients too to consider these things. So I do feel very much also that approach is very aligned with our ethos as therapists anyway. Like, it
Yeah,
feels very aligned with it, rather than kind of the older narrative around autism and ADHD has been very much the disorder, the idea of it being a disorder, the kind of medical model. And so this is moving very much away from that. And I think, like, as I say, I think that fits with our ethos as counsellors too.
and speaking of like fitting it all together in our general ethos, at Optima, our ethos or our area of expertise is around attachment.
Mm.
Um, and I was very interested by you mentioned in the book an intergenerational link of neurodiversity running in families, which can have an impact on how children are parented. And I guess that leads me to how neurodivergent and attachment defenses could maybe be misinterpreted or assumed to be one or the other in a room.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And you'll definitely know more about attachment than me, but from the neurodivergent perspective, I think what we find is that intergenerational link, because many autistic, and so we know that autism and ADHD are genetic, as are things like dyslexia as well. There's a genetic link there. So it's very possible that if we're seeing an adult or a child who's neurodivergent in our work, that actually quite possibly they might have parents who are neurodivergent themselves. They may well be undiagnosed. And historically, people really didn't get the support that they needed. There was so much more stigma. There was so much more, it was so much more hidden because of the way people were treated who were autistic ADHD. And it also wasn't picked up, certainly in women and people of colour. Autism ADHD just wasn't picked up. It wasn't in the research. It wasn't in the diagnostic criteria. So if you've got parents who potentially undiagnosed neurodivergent, and maybe they're viewing their world in the way they do and experiencing the world in the way they do, but don't realize that they're neurodivergent. Actually, what kind of impact is that going to have on the child in that scenario? In terms of emotional availability, in terms of emotional vocabulary, those things. We know that for some autistic people, we have alexithymia, which is the difficulty identifying and naming of emotions.
Mm.
We don't really know if that's something inherent or if it's down to the kind of not having that kind of education, I suppose, as a young person potentially. So there's all sorts of things that actually we can affect how we're brought up, how what we understand of the world, and of course intergenerational trauma in general, the trauma of being undiagnosed in a world, undiagnosed neurodivergent in a world that's not built for you, that's going to be passed down the generations too. So I definitely think there will be things around attachment there that are specifically different, maybe for neurodivergent people. And I
Mm.
think what you were saying about that in terms of behaviors, it could be even something like alexithymia. If you've got somebody as a client in your room who is struggling to find the words for an emotion, struggling to even feel the emotion, maybe, I mean, I know for me, I'm great at picking that up with clients. I can sense that emotion.
Mm.
But for me, like I'll just come up with my therapist, I don't know, no idea what I'm feeling today, absolutely no idea. Couldn't give you a word, nothing. And so with that sort of thing, I mean, I guess as an attachment therapist, like potentially you might be picking that up if you didn't know. You might be picking that up as some kind of avoidant tendency, maybe.
Hmm.
Um,
That's where
so
my mind
yeah,
went to. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really checking in with quite which bit are we working with here.
yeah, definitely. And even something like a lot of autistic people might struggle with eye contact. Not everyone does,
Mm.
but some people might struggle with eye contact. So again, if you don't know they're autistic, you've got a client in the room, they're avoiding eye contact. Potentially that might be something that you're thinking, or maybe there's a relational thing here. And also to say that a lot of neurodivergent people have relational trauma or relational wounds.
Mm.
Whereas actually, we might assume there's some attachment thing there, but actually it could be more to do with systemic ableism and systemic sort of the way they've been treated by society or at their school or at their workplace rather than anything else, potentially. But of course, it's all on the table, right? It's all something like we can explore. But I
And
think it probably is just something to keep in mind.
I'm really grateful that you used the A word that I can't pronounce. Um, emotion
Alexithymia.
blindness, say. Thank you. And I just wondered if we do find ourselves with that in the room,
Hmm.
what as therapists, what do we do with that?
Well, I think with alexithymia, one of the greatest ways is bringing out creative methods. And I was listening to your podcast the other day. I think it's with Georgina, and you were talking about creative ways of working, which is great because I was listening to that going, yes, yes, like brilliant. And absolutely something like alexithymia, I might find with a client that they're not able to name the emotion, they're not able to feel it in their body, but maybe they're able to say, oh, but that's that song from years back. Oh, that lyric to that song like perfectly encapsulated what I'm feeling right now. So we might in the therapy room, we might go, okay, let's play the song. Let's look at the lyrics. Let's see how that fits. Or maybe there's a character in a game, like a computer game or
Mm.
something that they really relate to. Well, let's explore that character and what are the features of that character and to just sort of try and I guess it's kind of to help bypass those barriers that might be there with alexithymia. And also, mainly, it's to say it's okay. So the fact
Mm.
that I don't know is a valid answer, you
Mm.
know, and it
Hmm.
doesn't mean it's avoidance. Sometimes it might, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. So I
No.
think, there's a few ways, but yeah, very much, and bringing attention to that with the client. So, what might that be like for a client maybe to discover that they experience alexithymia in that way? Um,
Mm.
that could be, a really rich thing to explore and think, how does that impact them in their day-to-day life as well?
And it's that idea of creativity. I'm just my kind of colloquial uh, experience, I suppose, has been actually that the working online with some neurodivergent clients actually really helps meet their needs in that
Mm,
different kind of way. So I've had people who've been in the room and they've found it hard. And then they've said, and I've actually suggested, why don't we try online next time? And by
mm,
being in their own space, surrounded by their own things, and there's something about, I mean, you and I are looking at each other now, but I'm not looking in your eyes, am I? So it's
yeah.
just something about actually meeting your client where they want to be met in the
Mhm.
widest sense, in the most local sense. Thinking creatively can just mean so many things, can't it?
Definitely, because that could be enough to just take the pressure off.
Mm.
And again, it's working collaboratively with them. If you've got the options there available to you, then fantastic. And I think with online work as well, I work with a lot of autistic and ADHD clients, obviously, and a lot are in burnout. So when they're
Mm.
really burnt out, it's going to be so hard for them to get in a car or get the bus or get the train or just to get out of the house, right? Just to get dressed in a way that they want to be outside. They might feel that's not available to them. So that being an option, I think as well, online being an option can be really, really helpful. And also things like I find some clients prefer fortnightly sessions, for example,
Hmm.
to help with processing, gives them a bit longer to process. Not everyone, lots of people will like weekly too, but it's just
Mm.
again, if I can have that flex in my diary, then I'll do my best to try and meet that need.
And I think that's really important. And it's about meeting their need for and asking what their need is, not just assuming. When I asked you about working creatively, I was kind of lining you up to maybe talk about your neuro cards. So I'm going to line that up for you.
I missed
Bit
that
of
one.
promotion. Why don't you, yeah, go
Yeah,
on,
I'd
do
love
an
to.
advert for yourself.
I'm not great, am I, at the business side of things? There we go. How shall I model them? These are my Neuro cards. Yeah, so these cards, they're therapy cards that I produced about 4 years ago. And I really produced them because there was nothing around. There was nothing that was kind of non-pathologizing. And I really wanted something that a client could kind of hold and something tangible that we could talk about. And yes, it started with just my clients, and then I kind of mocked up a few packs, and then suddenly everyone with all these therapists were kind of swarming on me, and it was fantastic, amazing. So yes, so I now sell these, and so if I show you a couple, so like we've got so that one's ruminate. Oh, I don't know if you've ever see that. My light's very bright. Ruminating there. So there's an image on the front, and then we've got like a description and some discussion prompts on the back. Thinking outside the box. I'm not going to show them all to you, but like masking's in here, attention to detail, memory, executive functioning. So all kind of neurodivergent traits or experiences that we can just explore with a client. And I find, particularly for younger clients, actually really helpful for teenage clients or somebody, we were saying about alexithymia earlier, actually, sometimes just being able to start the conversation, to be able to have the cards out on the table, to be able to think, okay, this is something like I think there's a big thing about someone's actually gone to the trouble to make these. So this must be an
Mm.
experience that lots of people have. And that's the normalizing, going right back to your quote at the beginning that you pulled out the book about the normalizing of these traits. It's not trying to make people normal, but it is saying that actually these are things that people experience and let's talk about it. That's essentially what they're for. Yeah, so that it's been thrilling to see so many counsellors, but also schools and
Mm.
like businesses that have sort of picked it up.
That
Um,
was where I first saw it, was in one of my kids' schools. And then I was like, I need
hey,
those. Yeah.
amazing. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I really think it's just having those kind of tools that we know are going to be neurodivergent affirming. I mean, it doesn't have to be mine, but there are a lot more out now, a lot of different tools that we can use that are neurodivergent affirming, but just to give clients something that says you're okay as you are, and
Mm.
let's talk about it.
You'll
So
be
yeah.
pleased to know the messages have been flying in that lots of people already have them and use them. So
Oh,
lots of
amazing. Thank you
compliments
so much.
coming in for you.
Oh, I love that.
Um, I, another question I've got, to change subject a bit, I suppose. So, you mentioned how essential it is to immerse ourselves not only in CPD training, but also like to hear wider neurodivergent voices, such as social media, autobiographical books. Where would you suggest therapists go to find the unusual, the usual, the normal, the
Yeah,
less normal resources, the
yeah.
insights?
Definitely. And if we were having this conversation 4 or 5 years ago, there would be very few places that I could kind of signpost to, I think, because there just hasn't been much. And as I said, books, as I said earlier, I think books have very much been sort of positioned in the medical model and the
Mm,
idea of disorder and so on, and also positioned from a point of view of an expert giving you this information. I'm the professor, I'm the academic or whatever, and I'm giving you this information about autistic people over there kind of thing. Whereas actually what neurodivergent affirming is all about, one of the big principles is embracing that lived experience, listening to neurodivergent voices, listening to the people that know, regardless actually of what topic we're talking about. We want to listen to the people that know, right, from the
mm,
inside. And because for autism and ADHD, we so often mask that or mask lots of neurodivergent traits, it means that there are kind of hidden realities. So I think it's really important for us to try and get a breadth of knowledge and information from different neurodivergent people and different and that might be, as you say, that like it may be books, but it might also be social media accounts. And
mm,
I do think there is sometimes in some circles there's a kind of a feeling that if it's not a published journal, a peer-reviewed journal, if it's not uh, a book with someone with a PhD, then like it's not as valuable. But actually, like this is the important stuff, isn't it? It's hearing from people who
yeah.
are actually experiencing this. So autobiographies definitely. There are more neurodivergent affirming type of um, approaches and books out now, but there's a ton of blogs and there's so much to find. I do have a blog article on my website which has book recommendations for therapists, so that might be one to have a look. And there's a few on there that I would definitely recommend around like language and so on. But yeah, I think and podcasts are a great one as well, aren't they? So
Mm.
yeah, broaden our horizons in that respect, and it's all CPD, isn't it? Even the conversations we're having is CPD. It's all learning, professional and personal development, I think.
That's where my mind went to as you were speaking. I was thinking, actually, it's in the conversations we have with each other.
Yeah.
So my supervisor actually recommended for me. There's a book called Dirty Laundry, and I'm trying to think who
Mm.
wrote it, but it's by a couple of
Yes.
TikTokers, and it's just the lived experience of, and they husband and wife write. One is neurodivergent, one is neurotypical, and they write about their experience together. And
Mm.
actually, I've used that with clients who've gone home and shared it with their partner, and they've each read a chapter, got together and had a chat, gone away, read the next chapter, come together and had a chat. And I think I would not have known of that resource had it not been shared with me by a fellow colleague. So actually, how incredible that we can, even today, what you're sharing, actually
Mm.
it all counts, doesn't it? It all adds up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And funnily enough, that creator, I haven't read the book, but I follow them on social media, and it's Rich and Rock. So the names of the uh,
That's
the
them. Yeah.
writers. Yeah, I can't remember what their full names are, but Rich has had an autistic diagnosis since writing the book, I believe. So actually, they're both neurodivergent. I think she's
Oh, I hadn't
ADHD.
realised that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So following their journey and actually him realizing he was autistic and getting that diagnosis is really interesting. So yeah, that's what I mean about like watching social media. You're watching that in real time. But as you say, I think the fact that neurodivergent people are able to publish books now, like it's much more accessible
Mm,
now to be able to do that. Like how fantastic, really.
it's incredible. And obviously, another resource we could head to is the TV. And we were
Yeah,
chatting earlier, weren't we, about this upcoming show on Channel 4. Now, both of us admit we've not seen it, but from the title alone, I can't remember the title off the top of my head now, and I'm kicking
yeah.
myself.
It's the
Um,
great ADHD myth with a question
mm,
mark at the end that
mm.
Channel 4 print.
That question mark's doing a lot, isn't it?
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, and I think yeah, so I haven't watched it. I don't even know if it's out
I'm
yet. I
not
think it
sure
might
it
be out next
is.
week or later this
Mm,
week. But I did make a comment on my social media about the sort of framing of some of the promotion around it and kind of how they're positioning it, like you say, with a question mark. Um, I mean, we don't question other things, do we? We don't question whether epilepsy is a thing,
mm,
or whether, I don't know, a broken leg is a thing. Like, well,
mm.
why are we questioning ADHD in this way? Um, and I could probably get on my soapbox about it, but I think there is a kind of narrative around this idea of overdiagnosis of ADHD and the idea that people are jumping on a bandwagon or they're just woke snowflakes who are like wanting a label and not wanting to work or whatever it might
Mm.
be. And I think that's a very dangerous narrative. And actually, very much I talk about it in the book as well because it's something we really have to critically reflect on what we're absorbing and what messages we're absorbing, particularly from mainstream media, I think.
Well, and what our clients are absorbing. And
Absolutely.
and our clients might even be a loved one of someone
Mhm.
who's neurodivergent. And actually, that's a
Mhm.
really mixed message for them to receive as well.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
and it's worrying for a lot of people.
so let's finish on a positive note. For those who are watching now, if there was like a takeaway from the book or from what's your message for us as therapists trying our hardest to work in a
Mm,
neurodivergent informed way?
I mean, it probably won't be one message, it'll probably be several.
Excellent. And I'm sorry to put you on the
But
spot. I said I
no,
wouldn't do
no,
that, and
that's
I have.
okay. No, that's okay. So I think one of the biggest things for me is that it isn't this work. So neurodivergent affirming therapy isn't a tick box. So we can't just provide some fidget toys in our therapy room, and then say, yeah, we're neurodivergent affirming. And we might even adapt our therapy, we might adapt our therapy room, we might have sensory accommodations and all of those things. But if we haven't done that work on our own internalized assumptions and our own internalized ableism, then we're going to sort of miss that client and we run the risk of doing harm inadvertently to clients. So I think just thinking of it as it is a bit more of an ethos or an approach rather than it is like a modality. But
Mm,
the other side of it is that it's absolutely doable. This stuff is absolutely doable because as counselors, as therapists, with all our training would have involved us getting uncomfortable, looking internally and looking at this stuff. It's just that sadly, a lot of the majority of our core trainings don't include anything about autism and ADHD or neurodivergence as a whole. So we've missed out on that. But
mm.
we're already doing this kind of work in other ways. It just needs us to turn towards it and like embrace it and just embrace the kind of the unlearning and the discomfort and I think it can be a really enjoyable thing as well. Yes, that was a couple of messages, wasn't it?
Definitely can. Thank you. I was keen that we finished on a positive note there, and you certainly did. Um, I can't recommend Amy's book more highly, so let me just say it again: Neurodivergent Therapy. And also you can get the Neuro cards too. Amy, a massive thank you for your time this evening, and you've
Oh,
been so generous with sharing your insights.
no,
Um,
absolute pleasure. Thank you,
been
Darren. Thanks so
amazing, and I've wanted to chat to you for ages, so this has just been the
much.
perfect excuse. So thank you.